of sessions at the Translating Europe Forum 2020. Thanks for following us. And as an old UK advert once went, this is the event that refreshes parts that others can't reach. And those of you who are following this morning may understand what I mean. We've been having a few technology problems. We apologize for that. And those of you who are watching on the web platform may discover that the content doesn't refresh and you see the old person. What happens is every time we switch camera, it doesn't automatically update on the platform. We've been trying to resolve it. We've not had much time to do so and not come up with a solution, apart from we will reduce the amount of camera changes for you, and we will also ask you to try and refresh if you can't see the screen what you're expecting to see on the screen. Thank you for your patience. We don't live in an ideal world on event platforms just yet. In case anyone is tuning in for the first time, you can listen to these proceedings in English, German, Italian, French, Spanish and Polish. The links to access the interpretation are published on the Europa webpage where you registered for this forum. And we already see there are more than 2,000 people following us on those web streams. So very much welcome to you. And thank you to our interpreters who are enabling you to follow us clearly. And a reminder that all the sessions are being recorded and will be available to watch again later. And the presentations will be made available for you too. And don't forget, please do tweet about what you're hearing. The hashtag is 2020TEF. Over the next 90 minutes, we're going to be exploring opportunities for translators in the growing sectors of entertainment and culture. Why are they growing? Well, I bet some of you tuning in today have spent quite a lot of time binge watching TV series and movies, following online courses, and even virtually visiting museum collections around the world during pandemic lockdowns this spring. Our consumption of this kind of content online has obviously increased considerably as we've been forced to entertain ourselves within our own four walls. And needless to say, translation plays a vital role in enabling all this content to travel to audiences speaking different languages around the globe. The increased demand for content is mirrored by a proportionate rise in the need for translation, both online and in the real world. This session will outline how some of these services work and handle translations, as well as giving some insights into how translation professionals can get involved. I'm going to explain how the session will run in a moment, but first let's see who's joining us to share their perspectives. I'd like you to please say hello after I've introduced you. Vice President, Media and Interactive Entertainment at translations.com in TransPerfect Technology Division. His work covers all aspects of localization, and he's involved in developing and rolling out the company's suite of AI-powered media localization solutions. He's a trained musician and applies his musical theories to the world of language dubbing. He speaks 4 languages, French, Italian, English and Spanish, and he's joining us today from near Barcelona in Spain. Please say hello.
Hello. Buongiorno.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Next, we have Mark Harrison. He's English language manager in the Globalization team at Netflix. He specializes in subtitling into English translation quality and content accessibility. He speaks English, Spanish and Portuguese, and he's logging on from London.
Hello, thanks for the invitation to be here today.
Hi, Mark. Then we'll be having a video presentation from Noémie GODARD, who is Sales and Marketing Manager at Orpheo, who will be talking about language technology in museums and theatres. And our last speaker contributing live is Ruth Kerr. She heads the international section at Federica Web Learning, the Centre for Innovation and Multimedia and Distance Learning at the University of Naples Federico II. She's responsible for language learning MOOCs, an acronym for Massive Open Online Courses, and for multimedia MOOC delivery. She speaks English, Italian, Spanish, French, and a bit of Finnish and German. And today she's joining us from Naples, just a couple of 100 kilometers south of me in Rome.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Aminda, for the introduction. Very nice to be here with you.
Excellent. So those are the speakers we will be hearing from. The way this session is going to run is we're going to have a presentation, short presentation from each speaker, and then we'll be taking questions for that person directly after their speech before moving on to the next person. So please do send in your questions for each speaker promptly and vote on your favorites so that we've already got a pool when we come to the end of the presentation. So we start with the moving image. So my translation work comes before the speakers that we have from that industry today, because I translate synopses, treatments and screenplays from Italian into English for filmmakers who want to find an international co-production partner or who want to apply for funding. Once the idea has been sold and the film has been made, then it comes the work of Jacques Baron. He's in charge of dubbing at the TransPerfect technology division, translations.com. And today he's going to talk about the art of translating for video streaming services, both in terms of subtitles and language versions. So it's up to you, Jacques BARREAU, and if you don't see him, please refresh your screens.
Exciting event. So today I'm going to talk about the translation for media entertainment, and if we have the time, we'll talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, which is becoming a big part of the media entertainment industry. So I'm going to start with talking a little bit about translation and adaptation from a cultural standpoint. So I do a few conferences during the year. I write articles, and I always say something: we don't dub to a language, we dub to a culture. So what does this mean exactly? Let's talk about the interaction between language and culture, which is key in this business. Obviously, it's necessary to speak a language if you want to understand a culture. Everybody speaks a lot of languages here, which is great. So, you know, I'm married with an Italian, my wife is Italian, and I'm married with a person from Rome. And to really understand the culture, well, I had to speak the language, obviously. And so if you understand that you have to speak the language to understand the culture, when you dub, in fact, a movie, or you do a documentary, or you write subtitles, in fact, you dub it for the people of this particular country, more than for the people who speak a certain language. Very simple example. I just moved to Spain. I was living in Los Angeles for 30 years. And, you know, in California, you have a lot of Latin Spanish speakers, people speaking Latin Spanish. And obviously, you know, I was doing some dubbing for the Latin American market. And obviously, the people that are in Los Angeles don't speak exactly the same language, or if they speak the language, they don't adapt it the same way. They don't use the same slang. They don't refer to the same cultural event, and that's the main difference. So a certain movie that was really dubbed for the Mexican market maybe is going to appeal to the people in Los Angeles, maybe a little bit less, because they will have less cultural references. So let's talk about what the translation is going to be used for. Difference between voiceover and dubbing. And after, at the end of the page, you see a line on the subtitle. We'll talk about the subtitle briefly. So first of all, the translation is the first step of the dubbing process. So this is a very important step. That's the foundation of what's going to happen after. The translation is going to be used to transform that in a spoken language. So, if you translate a book, you don't have necessarily the need of space and timing. But if you translate a documentary or a movie or a TV series, there is a concept of time, because, in documentaries, you are translating from a poetic standpoint. You are describing the nature, if it's a documentary about nature. But you know that the sentences that you are translating are going to be spoken by somebody, a narrator or a voiceover. So that's the first thing to understand. On the dubbing side, it's a little bit more complicated, in the sense of if voiceover doesn't have a timing constraint, the dubbing has a timing constraint. And the constraint is that you have to be synchronizing the translation with the lips of the speakers. So, in voiceover, you don't really replace and you don't give the illusion of that the voiceover was created in a particular language for a certain country. In the dubbing business, you want to make the dialogue fit the lips perfectly, which we'll call lip sync, and you want to give the illusion to the people that are watching the movie that in fact they are watching the movie in their language, and the movie was created for them. I grew up in France, and for years I was watching movies or TV series, and I had no idea that all these things were created in most of the time in America. I was saying, no, it's French, so it's probably done in France. Of course, after we understand the difference. So from a cultural standpoint, it's very important to understand also why we do that. So we, the translators need to respect, obviously, the intent of the directors, the intent of the actors, the performance, and in most of the countries, the translators are considered as writers. Why? Because on the title of my slide, you can see translation/adaptation. So what's the difference between translation and adaptation? The goal of the translator is to translate as accurately as possible, to have the information, accurate information, following the content, following the intent of the director, and the adapter is going to be able to change it a little bit to make it fit perfectly to the mouth. It's very difficult to translate following exactly the same rhythm and the same number of syllables, and we will see why in a few minutes. So the adapter is coming, and after the translation, in a lot of countries, I would say, the Middle East country, the Asian countries, you always have the content dubbed in two steps. First of all, the translation, and after the adaptation, to make sure that the lips are the dialogue is following the lips of the person on screen. So in most of the European countries, like the FIGs, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, where most of the content is dubbed, these four countries, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, are dubbing entertainment movie for forever, for the 50s. It started very early, and they are most of the time the translator adapter are only one person. In other countries where the alphabet is different, the writing is different, like Chinese or Arabic, it's much more complicated. So, example of movies that are dubbed in the same language. When I was working prior to TransPerfect, I was working at Warner Brothers for 20 years, and I did a lot of movies with them. I was responsible for the dubbing of the company. And I remember one of the movie was Get Smart, and Get Smart was it was a TV series very well known in the 60s. And when Warner released the movie in 2008, we thought, okay, let's do it the Mexican way, because the TV series was exclusively done for Mexico. But they also wanted to distribute the movie in Latin America, and that's where the culture is a little bit different. So we did a version for Mexico using Mexican slang, expressions that are really typical to Mexico, Mexico City, and they did a neutral Spanish version for the rest of the 20 countries in Latin America. And it was, that worked very well. We did the same thing, a little bit even more sophisticated in Storks. I think it was 2016, if I remember correctly. And Stork was this cute animation movie. And this time we said, okay, we are going to have one neutral Spanish version for all Latin America, and we are going to adapt it to the different culture by changing only the two main characters, so the little boy and the little girls. We rewrote the dialogues, and we had them dubbed in Chile, in Colombia, and in Mexico. So we had a neutral version for all the countries, and we have a specific version for Chile, Colombia, and Mexico City. And of course, the difference was not only the accent, but it was really the adaptation to the culture. What is funny in this country is not necessarily funny in another country. And finishing on this topic, you know, most of the translators are specializing. You have translators that are really good on comedies, translators that are really good for action movie, translators that are good for drama. So, you know, people who hire the translator know that, and you specialize a little bit. So now, source to target and how it affects the translation adaptation. Obviously, as everybody knows, English is a very concise language. It's a short. It's you know, the sentences are very short. When you start translating in Latin languages, mainly Italian, Spanish, French, it's getting way longer, or not way longer, but at least 20-25% sometimes. So this is also why you need to adapt it, because if you translate the English dialogue as is in French or in Italian, it's going to get longer. So you need to reduce it, and you need to be really smart. And that's why the translators are really considered as writers, and in most of the world they own their translation legally. And they have to be smart to, you know, rewrite the dialogue such a way that, first of all, the constraint of the lip sync is respected, and second, it makes sense, and it's still funny, and it still keeps the intent of the director. Last topic, briefly talking about subtitles. Okay, subtitles are the difference of the voiceover and dubbing, which are becoming spoken. Subtitle is going to be written, and the problem is that on subtitle you don't have a lot of space, because you have the screen, so the subtitle need to fit on the screen. You can do 2 lines, you can do 7-8 words per line, but you cannot do much more than that. And on top of that, you have to be very careful, because if you write a lot, people have to have the time to read it. So if you cannot read, that's a problem. So the translation for subtitle, it's also complicated, because you have to respect the intent, you have to explain what's going on, but that's why a lot of people are saying, well, it's not exactly what they say. And it's normal. It cannot be, because it's always a compromise due to this constraint of time and space. I would go to the next slide, And if you guys have questions, I can answer. If not, I continue. The influence of the translation in the recording process. So let's talk a little bit about the recording process, because once translation is done, well, now we have to record. So the recording, the dubbing started as early as the late 30s, and it started in America. I'm not going to give you the history of dubbing, but the French understood that, you know, the American could not really dub their movie in the 30s, so they decided to do it themselves. And they invented a system that is called detection. And the detection is just the fact of watching somebody speaking English and writing all the motion of the mouth. So if you say hello, so you are going to say A, it's a half open, O, it's an open mouth, and you have like a 12 or 15 signs like that, and you create a chart, like a musical chart, if you want. And when the detection is finished, you give that to the translator, adaptator, and the adaptator is going just to rewrite the dialogue following the motion of the mouth. So this is a very powerful project system, and I'm going just to show you on the next sentence what it looks like. So this is one of our tools that we develop at TransPerfect. It's called Studio Next. It's a remote recording system, and it's cloud-based, and the text that you see in white is the rhythm band. So it's scrolling from the right to the left, and when you see a little blue bar at the beginning of the sentence, when the text is scrolling following the video, well, the actor is going to talk. So the sync is really very accurate, and the timing is perfect. So like Aminda said, I'm a musician, and I always apply my musical theory. I was researcher at the conservatory in Marseille on sound synthesis and vocabulary of sounds, and you know, I always consider the human sound as an instrument. So unfortunately, the translator don't really know who they are writing for. You know, if you compare with music, everybody knows Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington is very famous because he was writing his music for a specific musician, and that's why his music was fantastic. Now, the translator cannot know who is going to do that, and that's why most of the dubbing session, if not all the dubbing session, have some changes during the recording. You know, the translation can be perfect. It can be really good, very well said, well written, but the actor is going to have a problem. It's not going to fit exactly in the mouth. It's not going to be able to say it properly. So that's why in practically all the dubbing session, you have at least a few sentences that are changed by the actors. So what is a good translation for dubbing? Well, a good translation is a sentence that is going to flow. So, you know, it's like a poetry. It's flowing. So, you know, you have to try to find a sense of poetry when you do dubbing, which is a bit complicated. Absolutely. So I'm just going to show you the dubbing process and talk really briefly about artificial intelligence. So casting, translation, this is what we are talking about, adaptation, that's where we were talking about before, and the recording process. And after, you have mixing and delivery. So you can have a physical studios where, you know, now the problem is with the COVID-19, most of the studios are closed. So that's why companies like mine develop this platform called Studio Next to be able to remote record. So the AI is going to give us a lot of information about the process. You know, during the recording, we are going to say, okay, how many takes the actors did to dub this sentence? How many times did he overload the microphone? How much time did he spend to do 30 sentences, counting the line, counting the character. This is really a very brief introduction of artificial intelligence. And I will finish with, translation memory. You can see my pin Batman. I dubbed the several movies for Warner, and when the big IPs starting to expand to the games, everybody needed glossaries, needed translation memory, because the goal was to keep consistency between the movie and the game. So the translation and the translation memory was extremely important at this time. We did the same thing for Harry Potter, doing all the spells, all the names, all the name of the villains, the cities, the places, and for Batman it was all the weapons, etc. So that's what do we do with this data? Like I said, we can collect a lot of information, and what to do with it? We can help the actors, we can follow their process, and we can mainly do a continuous improvement. If an actor has difficulty, and I can see that on the data, difficulty to do something, well, I will know that, and I will be able to help him. So artificial intelligence, sometimes people are a little bit afraid of it, but I think it's going to really help the dubbing community.
And there has been an interesting exchange going on in the chat about subtitling and the need to compress. And Andrea Alessandra said she only did briefly subtitling for her bachelor degree thesis, and she remembered it broke her heart to slaughter some of the English jokes to make them fit into Romanian.
Exactly.
And then somebody added, Clara added, when it comes to jokes, the way I like to handle them is to find a similar alternative or just make a new joke. We have to keep in mind the target audience, so being creative in this sense is more welcome. Yes, we understand the reference, and for some people it is butchering. However, for the receiver, it's not as important in that regard. It's more about the landing of the joke in their eyes. So yes.
Exactly.
Yes, so and that's quite difficult. I mean, I suppose people who are used to translating in this forum, in this field, know that they have more freedom than perhaps some people would have in perhaps another field.
Yeah, I remember one movie. I think it was Ocean 11 or. And his friend is coming and say, give me your John Hancock. So I remember everybody was asking me, what is John Hancock? And of course, if you don't live in the States and you don't know that John Hancock was signing the Declaration of Independence a few hundred years ago, he was one of the signatories. It's becoming now, in the slang of American, give me your John Hancock. That doesn't mean anything to a French or an Italian. So you have to find something else, and it's exactly what this person is saying. That's really the adaptation to the culture. You transform the joke to make it funny for the people of the country.
And in fact, Stavrula says experienced subtitlers never slaughter anything, nor do they truncate. They condense, rephrase, and create.
Exactly.
So we have a question in here, the one that's got it's got from Eugenie, and the question is, in your opinion, what are the main opportunities in the sector for us translators?
The main, if you want to translate for in Europe, if you want to translate for a TV series or movie for the platform, and we have somebody from Netflix here, so that's a great segue. There is so much content now being generated, not only by the major, like I was doing before, but also by the platform. All the TVs, all the movies, but mainly the content on on platform, that's a huge opportunity because we are missing translator like we are missing actors right now. Because suddenly for the last 5, 6, 7 years, the amount of content exploded. So we need more translators. So that's the first one. And after that, because you are going to have a lot of memory translation done by computer, you also have a lot of people that are specializing in post-edit, which is going after all this machine translation and or memory translation and making sure and QCing what the machine are doing or what the glossaries are doing. That's also very important. Yes.
Very, very interesting. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. I'm going questions in the chat about how to access these sessions. The recordings, we're going out live on YouTube right now, but then the recordings will be available on demand on the Translating for Europe YouTube channel, and you can find the links via the social media of the forum. So now I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Mark Harrison. He's from Netflix, which we should remember is not a platform. It's a streaming service. Mark is here to tell us how it handles translation and localization for the content that it streams. Obviously, he's not here to talk about Netflix in general. He can't discuss its future production plans or budgets or anything like that. So please, when you send in your questions to him, make sure that they focus on the translation side. Thank you.
Thank you, Aminda, and thank you to the European Commission for the invitation to be here today. My name's Mark Harrison. I'm the English language manager at Netflix, based in London, coming to you on a slightly foggy day on day 2 of a new national lockdown. I've been working in subtitling and translation and content accessibility for the last 16 years or so, and it's a great honour to be here today. So just a few words about Netflix and just a bit of an introduction into our history and how it fits in with the audiovisual translation space. So we started off as a DVD business in 1997 and then moved into streaming around 10 years later. Then we launched our first localized service in Latin America in 2011. And the following year, we moved into the UK and Ireland, Nordic countries, then into Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, Luxembourg, and Switzerland in 2014, Italy and Spain the year after, and then we went truly global in 2016 with 21 languages in 190 countries. We're now available in over 30 languages, and we're adding new languages all the time. Most recently with the launch of the Russian interface earlier this year, which also saw more Russian subtitling and dubbing being added and available in regions where we serve Russian localization, which is great. We are operating though at an unprecedented scale. So we've got many challenges, but we really feel like we're just at the beginning of this journey. Globally now, we're at 195 million paying subscribers, and of course they expect a lot for their money, and we really do intend on delivering value for money. We strive to serve them a fantastic experience, all the way from sign up to enjoying our content wherever the location and whatever the language. Whether they enjoy subtitles or dubs, we aim to please and accommodate their expectations. And we're now producing hundreds of original films and series a year, meaning thousands of assets for localization. And this volume of content that we produce internationally is growing all the time. These are all high quality productions produced in market and in the local language. And for us, this really shifts the localization paradigm and presents new challenges relating to scale, new language pairs and directions. And as such, we need to build a flexible many-to-many model working at a scale and pace that the audiovisual translation industry hasn't seen before. And of course, we're still learning, we're still figuring it out as we expand our offerings. So as Aminda mentioned, I'm part of Netflix's Globalization team. I work in the language management team, and in conjunction with our fantastic dubbing division, We're a big group of innovators, project managers, vendor managers, subtitlers, and linguists working across the globe, handling Netflix's translation and localization needs. We're a very cross-functional team, and we get involved in many of Netflix's operational stages, projects, productions, and processes. So in some way, shape, or form, we touch most of the copy, be it metadata, subtitles, what you see on product, etc., and many of the steps which sit between production and the member pressing play. So I really love this this quote from Ted Sarandos, who's our Chief Content Officer, and it perfectly sums up our approach to global storytelling. When stories from different countries, languages, and cultures find a worldwide platform where the only limitation is the creator's imagination, then unique yet universal stories emerge that are embraced by a global audience. And we really do believe that great stories transcend borders, and we're committed to providing a platform and streaming platform to allow our titles to travel from anywhere to everywhere. And obviously, localization is key to that, and we want to recognize the importance of our trusted partners, translators, and everyone that helps us take our content globally. As a team, we work really, really hard to make sure that we provide them with the best tools, support, context, and information that they need to do their best work. And it really is a team effort. So all of this helps us live up to our main mission as a company, and that is to entertain the world. By localizing our content and our platform through subtitling, dubbing, translation, and by internationalizing our product for different markets and different languages, different alphabets, we connect globally with our members, and we ensure that we can fulfill our remit of entertaining the world. We really want all of our fantastic content originating from Europe to travel globally and help us showcase the talent and incredible stories that we have right here in Europe. And we want more people from different parts of the globe to see themselves represented on screen. When titles connect locally, we've seen that they're also increasingly well received in other areas. We've had recently Marianne from France, Dark, and our recent release of Barbarians from Germany, and our much-loved series La Casa de Papel from Spain. And we really love it, of course, when global audiences discover local stories from a new country. But that doesn't mean that every series or film will travel like that. Some stories are hyper-local and tend to be watched mostly by a local audience. And for us, that's okay too, of course. As I mentioned, we don't just focus on subtitling and dubbing when we think about localizing our content and our service. As you can see in the screenshot, we do a lot of other areas of localization. So to create this localized experience and bring you the stories that you love in your language, we also cover marketing, trailers, TV spots, the product interface itself, and so on, all with the aim of ensuring our members receive the best quality we can create for them, whether they're experiencing Netflix within our own ecosystem or off service in a physical space or via some other medium. And of course, we also work really hard to ensure we select culturally relevant images and write meaningful synopses and translating all of the relevant content with the target culture and language in mind. So personalization is definitely part of our localization approach. We don't just localize for a regional language, the experience itself is localized for our members. Sorry, I'm having some problems with the slides. Okay, so this approach to localization, as this image shows, also extends to apps, games, websites, consumer products, physical media, theatrical releases, and so on. And we're really coming across new products and content types which need to be localized all the time. The more our business innovates, the more we have to innovate our approach to localization as well. So with this approach in mind, and all things considered, how can we scale our localization operations while keeping a balance of creativity and linguistic excellence? What we do is look at adding the right technology into our workflows in the right place. And one of the ways we do this is by ensuring that wherever possible, our subtitlers and translators don't start with a blank page. Many of you will be used to working with CAT tools like Trados, so it's really exciting for us to be able to bring some of those same approaches to the world of audio-visual translation to help us scale up our approach to localization while still favoring our human translators over automation. So our cloud-based, our subtitling process largely happens within our own ecosystem of tools. And this is made up of project management tools, platforms, project assignment tools, and a cloud-based subtitling program. Within that workflow, we've got a step which leverages a hybrid TM-MT model, providing us with the step that we call assisted translation, or AT. Through the introduction of this AT step, we wanted to marry great translation memory and machine translation technologies to create this solution. So with this model of TM and MT, what does that mean for Netflix? Obviously, we start with our expert translators. Our translation memory is our own database of previously translated text segments and elements from our subtitle archive and glossaries. When we match these against source language copy, so usually English subtitle segments, if we find content in the subtitle template we've translated before, we'll populate that string directly within the subtitle template. And we're lucky because, of course, we've got such a lot of content that we have millions of text segments to mine. And of course, this archive is growing considerably all the time. Where we don't have a translation memory match, or as an alternative option, we then present a machine translated string. So I must emphasize that both of these options are presented as suggestions to our subtitle translators because, importantly, we want to provide choice. The translators can use the suggestion as is, they can edit it as they see fit, or if they prefer, they can simply delete it and start from scratch using their own translation. Our goal here is to really provide only the highest quality option, whether it's from the MT or the TM. What we think we're doing here is really definitely helping to reduce the load on the translator, allowing them to focus on the overall crafting of natural sounding translations, which create the best viewing experience possible for our members. What we want to do is remove that duplication of effort and help drive quality by recycling strings where possible. We also use our existing and newly translated content to continuously train the NMT engine as we progress. So leaning on the improvement in NMT we've seen over the past few years, as well as having our data science and machine learning experts incorporate linguistic feedback and feedback directly from the linguist to both improve the quality of the output and the translator experience itself. So I love this example. I loved this show last year, Russian Doll. So just one example of how this approach helps. So first off, it supports the consistent treatment of creative translations across asset types. So Russian Doll was a fantastic 8-episode original series which came out last year. And the phrase "sweet birthday baby" appears 3,351 times across all of the English audiovisual assets for this series. So it's a pivotal plot point as it marks each time the protagonist starts a new time loop. If you've seen the show, you'll know what I mean. And it's one of the main plot points, and it was used throughout trailers, hooks, previews in every single episode of the year. So it's a really pivotal, episode of the series. So it's a really pivotal thing that we want to make sure we get right every single time. Number two, of course, the introduction of this AT set also helps us eliminate any repetitive work on the translators. For example, a common phrase like "I don't know" appears nearly 90,000 times across assets in the Netflix catalog. So by introducing the AT into our workflows, we start to see many of the benefits seen in other areas of the translation industry, recycling strings, achieving consistency, and driving quality. So a very quick overview of how this looks and how the AT ties in with the subtitling technology. So we start off with by creating timed, edited and segmented subtitle templates containing the source text in the same language as the content. So here you can see on the left-hand side, we have our template. This template is crafted in our proprietary subtitling program. It's time-coded and segmented to support our downstream translators' needs. The text is then extracted and goes through the AT workflow. The translation is then resegmented and mapped back to the structure of the template, thus providing the first pass translation for the translators. All of this, as I mentioned before, is to ensure that when our subtitlers start their work, we've done as much as we can to help them get started, and we set them up for success. But of course, this is an area that we're still learning. So some of the initial benefits that we've heard from our pool include saving time on typing, referencing dictionaries for unknown words, etc. And the provision of multiple suggestions is also really beneficial, because this can also help inspire the translators. So we're really excited to keep learning in this space and improving where we can. In addition to the AT step, we put a lot of attention on context provision. We provide access to show guides, dialogue lists, creative and linguistic guidelines, glossaries, and so on, similar to what Jacques was explaining in the previous presentation. We've also got extensive subtitling style guides. These are all publicly facing. You can find them on our website if you just search for Netflix Tiny Text style guides. And these allow us and all of our linguists and subtitlers to work together in the same style and provide a consistent output. We know we don't always get it right, but we strive to improve in every way possible to bring our members the best quality we can and to allow the content to shine and travel. Ultimately, the goal of achieving high quality in our subtitles is to make our members feel like they're not reading subtitles. Because of course, for us, good subtitles allow the content to sing, and part of a good and immersive localized experience is finishing a film and not feeling like you've read subtitles. You want to remember having heard the dialogue, not having read it. And for us, a good sign of quality is actually not positive feedback, but no feedback. This is really an indicator that the subtitler did their job, the subtitles went unnoticed, and let the content itself shine. So while AT helps us achieve translation quality and efficiency, reusing translated strings and aiding the translators, that's obviously only part of what makes good subtitling. We always aim for well-structured, segmented and timed subtitles with the right reading speed, using natural and idiomatic language with accurate and consistent translations, and that the AT helps us get there. So I already see some comments and questions about how people can get involved in translation at Netflix. So sort of in anticipation of that, and due to the fact that we can't actually meet face to face as we normally would in a conference setting, I have a link here. If you go to this link, it will give you a bit more information about what we do in this space and how they can get involved and which vendors we're working with. And on that note, thank you very much for listening.
How they could, what opportunities there are at Netflix. So when we publish the presentations, you'll be able to sort of click on that link and access it, and also see it obviously through the recording. I thought a lot of people would be interested in that. So our top question that we have right now, which has come from Caitlin, is if a film that predates Netflix already has subtitles, do you keep the original or do you write your own?
If it's a language, or if we need to create a subtitle file because we don't have that language available as part of the deal, then we may create our own. But generally, if there is a subtitle file in existence for an existing piece of content that we license, then that will end up on Netflix too.
Okay, now this question, it's very popular. It kind of ties in with the question about opportunities for working at Netflix, but actually a bit wider. So this is why I wanted to address it, because you yourself started off in subtitling. So someone's asking, are there any opportunities for fresh graduates with no previous experience to gain experience in audiovisual translation, and then obviously move into the industry?
Yeah, so I did a master's in audiovisual translation and started off as an in-house subtitler on the vendor side, moved on to another vendor working in home entertainment and DVD, back when DVDs were a thing, and then moved into broadcast localization, where I stayed for about 12 years before coming to Netflix. We do see a lot of opportunity for graduates, but I would say that the link that I provided in there does give a bit more information about the vendors that we work with. So we don't work directly with freelancers. They work within our technical ecosystem and environment. And all of the vendors that you see on that page that I link out to, they are definitely the best port of call if you're interested in moving into this space and gaining experience.
Okay. Thank you. So this next question, which has 10 votes, has come in from Edith. And it says, often it would be good to have the option of viewing a movie or a series in the original language, but Netflix only offers the dubbed version. What is the point of this policy? I'm not quite sure if you can actually answer that, but since you do work in the field, I imagine you can.
Yeah, this is a question we actually see a lot, and it usually relates to where you're viewing from and the kind of language behavior you've told the system. So Netflix will always, there is sticky behavior on Netflix around how you view content. And quite often in certain regions, depending on what content you're viewing, Netflix will give you the language options that it thinks you want. You're always able to change the language. So if, for example, you press play on something and the dub version starts, but you want to hear with the original audio and the subtitles in your language, you need to go to the audio and subtitles menu, which is usually in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, depending on how you're watching. And you're able to see which audio file is the original and then which subtitle language you want to pick.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully that's given people some tips and opened up a whole new world. We've got a question. What percentage of your subtitle content would you say is in English?
What percent? So is that in terms of what content is in English, or?
Yeah, I assume so. This is from Haley.
I mean, we're growing our international slate all the time. I think it's fair to say that the bulk of the content that you'll see on Netflix is source language English. Everything we have on service has an English subtitle file of some description, and we localize whenever we launch an asset globally. We always localize into our 30 plus languages.
Okay, then here we have, it's not so much a question as a comment from Eugenie, who says, I think this shortage of actors, translators, I think this is more something that Jacques was talking about, might be related to the pricing policies of the main companies in the industry. I think we'll leave it like that. But I just, last question for you, and then I think we're going to have to move on. Can you confirm that individual subtitlers' names appear in all the series and film credits?
Yeah, so we have a policy which is mapped out in our time text style guides around translator credits. So we always include a subtitle for the translator credit in the subtitle templates so that the original translator working on that language has their credit present. Yeah.
Okay, good. And I find it fascinating that you publish your style guides. I'll certainly be going to have a look. Very, very interesting. Okay, well, we're going to leave that there. Maybe we'll be able to come back to you if we have some more time at the end. Thanks to everyone for sending in the questions. Have a video presentation from our next speaker in a different cultural field, which has need of translations, that of museums and theatres. In her recorded intervention, Noémie GODARD provides visitor solutions for museums and cultural sites like Versailles in France, Caesar's Palace in Rome, the Sydney Opera House in Australia, and even the White House in Washington, whoever is the incumbent. So what are these visitor solutions? Well, they're primarily audio and media guides. Naomi will tell us a little bit more about her and her team at Orpheo provide content for this kind of language technology in museums and theatres. Let's see what she has to say.
Today. I will start with a quick explanation about what we do. So we are the group Orpheo, an international company that dedicates to audio and multimedia solutions for visitors. The group was created in 1992 here in Grenoble, France. Since that date, we have expanded and we are now working in more than 40 countries all over the world. And we also have 12 subsidiaries. To give you an idea on some figures that you can see on the screen now, we have 300,000 of devices in use all over the world, and we have also produced thousands of hours of audio and multimedia content. So now what we do, our expertise. So we have 5 main activities. The first one is to manufacture our hardware solutions. We have manufacturing here in-house in Grenoble. We have different type of products. It can be audio guides, multimedia guides, radio guide solution for guided tours. We also, of course, specialize in the creation of audio and multimedia content. We have our own dedicated team, and we can go from the script writing until the recording and video animations and other services that I will explain you later on. Then we also develop smartphone applications to be downloaded on the visitor cell phones, and we can use also the interface via progressive web app. We also manage the service of the renting of the audio guide or multimedia guide directly on site. So we have our own staff in some of the biggest sites all over the world. And finally, we can do also audiovisual integration. So then, of course, I'm going to give you some examples of sites we've equipped. So we are working with the Kremlin in Moscow, with the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Japan, with the Grand Central Terminal in New York City, Versailles Palace, Orsay Museum in France also, La Pedrera from Gaudi in Barcelona, the 9/11 Memorial, and many other sites. So now to enter into in the topic, the translation. We have different challenges that are very important to us. The first one is to keep the tone and spirit of the original script. We have to convey the true message of the site, but maintaining a fine balance between form and content. Of course, we have to respect the identity of the script because it is the identity of the site of the museum. Then we have also to transcreate the text without trying to stick to the script or to the words. A good translation is actually one that does not feel like a translation. It should look like an original script, as if it was written originally in the translated language. Then, of course, we have to adapt the translation to the target audience and their culture, their knowledge about the history of the country they are visiting, their religion also. You cannot say the same thing to a certain nationality and to another. For example, Waterloo Battle, would you talk about a victory or a defeat? If you're talking to a French visitor or an English visitor. So it's really important to respect that also, to understand that it's not only translation, but also adaptation, localization, basically. And then, of course, things like, for example, puns and jokes, they cannot be translated. They have to be localized and even sometimes transformed to be understood properly. And of course, finally, you have to stick to the message and tone and deliver the content in a register that is appropriate for the audience you're talking to. It can be kids and so on. Then we always keep in mind that the text, that the translation of the text is made to be read out loud. We are not translating a book. We are really translating a text that will be read out loud by a speaker, and that should be understood immediately by the visitor. So it's really important, this, because it will hold the attention and the interest of the visitor. It's not a conventional text, you know. We have to avoid complex and long sentences, for example. So that's why I wrote this KISS. The KISS methodology, I think some of you will know. It means keep it short and simple. So it's really important to go to the point. Then, of course, we always have to keep the human dimension. A good experience, when you talk about visitor, to us, a good experience is when when you just forget about the machine you have in your hand. It can be an audio guide, a multimedia guide. As long as you are really interested and really focused on the content, you just forget about the fact that it's an audio guide in your hand, and you just feel like there's a guide or an historical character whispering into your ear. And finally, sometimes, as we work really worldwide, we can have to deal with translating exotic languages. We're not talking about French, Chinese, English, Russian, Japanese, but like local languages. So in this case, we really count on our international network to find this perfect translator that is a native and a professional also, and to be able to make sure that this translation, a bit harder, will be really localized. So then we are talking about methodology now. Regarding the process for a translation, we would say that it is and it has to be a long process, because it's not only translating, you know, it's adapting, as I told you, but it's also for the translator really understand the text, the topic, and he has to conduct researches on terminological terms, on cultural terms, and this takes time. We think that it's approximately 50% of the time to translate the text. We count in an average that we can translate something like 2,000 words a day. Then regarding the process by itself, we start by script writing or rewriting if we receive the script already written by the customer. So we start in the source language, of course. Then when the script is validated by the customer, by the museum, then we send it for a first translation that is, of course, by a native and professional translator. He will conduct his research and start the translation. We have translators that needs, and it's important to read out loud the translation when they make it, just to make sure that the flow is good, that it will be fluent when the speaker will have to, the voice talent will have to read it. Then the text is sent to a proofreader that is also a native translator that will make his correction and bring like a new eye on this translation. And then the first translator reads it again validates on his side, and then we send it to the museum or the site for validation. Once it's done, of course, we can do all the other things that comes after in an audio guide or multimedia guide project, recording, sound effects, etc. So regarding the profile of our translators, of course, we work with native speakers in the target language, and that have a university degree, like, for example, preferably translation, but it can be also art, history of art, heritage, archaeology, and they should also have a strong background and experience in one of these fields. As I said also before, it's important that these translators have advanced research skills, and that they should be able to conduct these researches totally autonomously, to make sure to be really accurate with the original script. Of course, we try to disregard, usually we disregard translators that specialize in technical terminology, for example, because they would be less focused on rendering ideas and concepts in a fluid way. So now I'm talking about new ways to convey knowledge to the visitors, and that would bring new needs in terms of translation. So the first one is smartphone applications and progressive web app. It's a trend that has been existing for years now, but we see that with the situation with COVID, we totally see that it's something that is increasing, for the simple reason that in some sites, for the moment, audio guides are forbidden. It depends on the countries, and that in this case, the visitor will be able to download the application on his mobile. So we offer this service. Linked to this, we see also a big increase on the demand of immersive tours and augmented reality. So this is especially useful when you're talking, for example, about historical sites, archaeological sites, for example, when you have to show the visitor another dimension of the site. It can be how it was 200 years ago. It can be with more interactivity. So it's really another trend that we can see today. A third one, of course, is that culture should be accessible to all. So we can also offer adaptation to impairments that can be all type of impairments. It can be, of course, problems of visions. It can be deaf people, for example. So it's really important to adapt, of course, to all the audience museum can welcome in their site. Another need is for human guided tours with multiple languages. So in this case, it's a guide that basically is talking to his visitors, and he speaks a language, and sometimes we have requests where he would like to broadcast the content to other participants, to other visitors that don't speak his language. We have a solution where we can, of course, translate, record, etc. And then a hardware solution where you can broadcast directly the content to the visitors. Automatic translation, it's written, there's no way. Automatic translation via, for example, a robot or things like that. You speak and there's something that translates automatically. We absolutely avoid that and don't advise it. Because first, the quality will be so bad, the flow will be bad also, the voice won't be like totally human. So let's keep it to the professional and to the people human people who are really aimed at that. And then last thing is that we are creating now a community platform to share with our customers and partners all of our resources we've been gathering for 30 years now. It can be the voice talents, the script writers, historians, and so on. And so we really want to gather all of this experience from all the subsidiaries also we have today and share it with the museums. So my presentation is over, and I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Of information and the need for this cultural context that is actually coming up in every speaker that we're hearing from today. Now I'm going to move on to our final live speaker, who is Ruth Kerr. She's in charge of language learning, massive open online courses at Federica Web Learning Center in Naples. She's going to give us a bit of background on the rise of the MOOC and particular challenges of translating in this educational context. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you. Yes, Federica Web Learning is a university centre for innovation in multimedia and distance learning, but it's also a platform for the delivery of MOOCs, and it has one of the biggest university MOOC portfolios in the world. So I'm here to talk about MOOCs and translation of MOOCs, and I'm delighted that I'm included in a session with Netflix and other entertainment and culture industries, because that's right. MOOCs, massive open online courses, started life as an evolution of open courseware projects at universities like MIT. And so they're part of the democratization of education movement, a way of sharing research and teaching expertise with people who otherwise wouldn't have access, and a way for public universities to return something to the public domain. But then the idea of being able to study quality courses with great professors from some of the top universities like Harvard or Yale or Imperial College for free, and for a small cost get a certification to demonstrate your learning, became very appealing. And the audience demographic was not university students, but lifelong learners. And by 2019, we are seeing already 110 million people on the 4 major global platforms. Then COVID hit in 2020, and as people were forced into lockdown, there was a massive surge in online learning, and people turned to MOOCs as a way of spending their time profitably, learning something for personal interest, or even to upskill given the dodgy nature of employment prospects. These graphs here show the figures. Coursera registered 10 million new learners in 1 week, and you can see the peak in April. The main platforms in India and China also registered massive increases. In terms of the topic areas, the main interest perhaps shifted slightly from computer and data science pre-pandemic to an increased interest in personal development, psychology, and soft skills. Learning online as well, for example, there's language learning is in there. And yes, here we are. Just to confirm that, here we have the actual courses, the most popular courses during the pandemic. And in the pole position, We can see the science of well-being, which isn't surprising. We can also see a course on COVID, caring for patients with COVID. 30 were produced. And there's also a course for English in the workplace. I haven't put English here, but there's also been a massive increase in interest in language learning via MOOCs. There are still 180 courses to learn English, but we can see from this list that the variety of languages on offer is much greater these days. We've got Japanese and Korean, just to name a couple there. But what language do MOOCs speak? So in the past, the policy of the big platforms was to deliver the majority of the content in English as a lingua franca. And only national platforms like Fun in France or Myriada X in Spain, Federica in Italy, used their native language to deliver their learning content. But that's changing now. MOOCs now speak 27 languages, as we can see from here, and universities often deliver in their native language with corresponding versions of the platform too. So we can say, I think, that the big platforms are becoming less global and more international. From this list, we can see the growing numbers of courses available in Spanish and French, Chinese, and Romanian. It's also interesting to note that the two largest MOOC platforms in China also started opening up their content, their learning content post-pandemic to an international audience, with 400 courses now translated into English. Learning how to learn, one of the most popular MOOCs of all time. Here we can see that that's available in 26 languages, I think, yes. It's available in 26 languages, and these translations were actually crowdsourced. But we can also see that they offer other language versions of the same course, kind of raising perhaps a question about translating culture. But the Khan Academy, for example, which is one of the most popular secondary school platforms, has 34 different translator communities, and these include Azerbaijani, Bulgarian, Czech, Dutch, Danish, and many more. And all these communities also translate on a voluntary basis. When we think of the delivery, the language of delivery for online learning content, I think it's worth reflecting just for a moment on the concept of internationalization, which of course is a very important concept for university positioning and ranking. I think this paper by DeWitt and Hunter seems to say quite well that there are two aspects, and one is about the curriculum and producing graduates who have the competencies to operate in a global context, and the other is to do with virtual mobility, intercultural competencies, and international classrooms. However, whichever way we look at it, the language for MOOC delivery remains an issue all the same, and especially in a multilingual Europe. So now I'd like to have a look in more detail at the Federica work that we've done. So we work in Italy. Italy's a minority language, and so to open up our content to a more international, a much broader audience, we decided to deliver on the edX global platform. We put 50 courses in Italian, 10 courses in English, and a couple of courses in Spanish. Now, in general, the English and Spanish courses had much, much bigger audiences. In this slide, you can see our top 10 performing courses, and you can see that there was some international reach for the courses in Italian, but it was really the translated versions into English and Spanish that opened up our markets to the US, to India, and Brazil. We had I hope you can see it. The course at the bottom here, Comparative Judicial Systems, we ran that in Italian, and we had a 99-point-something% audience Italian from Italy. And then when we offered the same course in English translation, we got 133 countries on board. So at Federica, we have definitely decided to continue with translation of our MOOCs, and that kind of leads to the next bit. When we translate MOOCs, what do we mean really? Are we talking about translating video lectures, text and quizzes, or are we looking in some way to translate the whole of the learner experience and the interaction in forums, etc.? Which languages do we choose to translate into? Do we opt for the lingua franca in the global sort of vision, or do we opt for lesser used European languages to broaden our scope? And do we translate into one language, or is it a good idea to translate into multiple languages on the same course? And then last but absolutely not least, which courses do we choose for translation? Do all topics, all types of courses translate equally well? And how do we translate? I assume that most of you in the audience are translators, so you absolutely don't need me to spell out or analyze the differences between the different types of translations that are on offer. Obviously, as a university centre, I have to balance a little bit availability of resources and when, cost, etc. Quality, obviously, but I would say that as a MOOC provider, what we tend to do is a mix of all these approaches, and I will say that we use professional translators wherever, whenever we can, and certainly when we do machine transcription and translation, then we always have the human revision for that. I think Mark mentioned an interesting thing about memory software, so we also use that for consistency. We're starting to experiment with the voice recognition for dubbing, as well for MOOCs. On the crowdsourced translation, sorry, just one quick comment. I put out a call not long ago and was quite surprised to get offers from China, from Thailand, and from Egypt, which is great. But then it begs the question about having the resources available locally to actually do the quality control and check on languages that nobody in our team actually speaks.
Ruth, can you start bringing to a close, please?
Yes, I didn't realise it was. Okay, so quickly, we worked on the Emma project at Federica in 2016, and we defined and we aimed to create language learning environment that embraced cultural diversity. And we defined the parameters, the dimensions of cultural diversity as pedagogy, language, and content personalization. Language is obviously, it's the most obvious one, and we translated the courses into the 8 partner languages, translating from the partner language into English, and then using the English as the bridging language into other languages based on automatic systems developed by one of our partner universities, the Polytechnic in Valencia. The classic errors about segment length and punctuation were quickly resolved, and multilingual delivery, although the numbers were not very high in general, we did see that the offer of translated versions increased the audience by doubling it at least, and we saw quite a lot of our audience studying the same MOOC in 2 languages. In fact, our surveys demonstrated that many people, a good 60% of our audience, used the translations to improve their language skills, not simply for access. We didn't translate the forum section, the comments interaction section, and there was some evidence of multilingual contributions. Here we can see some French, English, and Italian all in the same space. The audience obviously understand each other perfectly, even if they don't speak the languages. So, in conclusion, as we move forward into the future. So I mentioned pedagogy before. I think pedagogy is always underpinned by culture, philosophy, history, our interpretation of teacher roles and student roles. And so that really brings us back to the question of translating culture that the speakers before me already talked about so well. I think that as we move into the future, we're going to see more and more MOOCs translated to broaden access and to really share best practice and research excellence in Europe, and in line with the new digital education action plan from the European Commission. There's obviously a lot of demand from the public, and I think this will continue to grow, creating a lot of translation opportunities for people like yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. We're coming to the end, so I want to just get in a couple of questions. One, which says, what criteria do you use to decide when to use professional translation or another approach?
The difficulty of the course, the complexity of the translation task, the availability of local resources. Yeah. So if we have...
So there's a lot of factors in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes do you, have you sort of maybe gone for one option and then thought actually it would have been better in another one, and can you change midway?
Yes, we can and do. We have constant monitoring of work that comes in, work that's been produced in our translation workflows, so we're free to change tack at any moment, and it does happen. I think that compared to Jacques and to Mark, the precision isn't so important for us, for our lecture translations of lectures. What we're very, very concerned about is that the work is comprehensible to our audience and the content is really clear and clearly explained.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank all of our speakers. I don't know if we can get them on the screen. Great, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all the three of you for presenting live. There were a lot of questions. I think people were very, very interested. So it was a great session. Thank you very much. I think you've opened people's eyes to new opportunities in so many different sectors, and also in sectors that are, let's put it this way, more interesting than others. So that's great to have given these stimulation to everyone. Thank you very much indeed. And with that, we've reached the end of this session. I hope you all enjoyed it online. And now we're going to have a 30-minute break before the next afternoon session, which discusses teaching tech. What do we need to do to train translation technology experts? And that starts at 3 p.m. CET. After that, there'll be a short closing session, followed by a final set of virtual networking sessions at the end of the day. Once again, thank you to all our speakers and to you for sending in your questions and for voting on other people's questions. And with that, I now bring this session to a close.